I'm supposed to discuss embracing opportunities in uncertain times. And before I delve into the slides I have to share, one is just a very brief overview of what I do. So I run a holding company that owns businesses that focus on the manufacturing, production, and sales of branded consumer and agro-allied goods in Nigeria. So that's what I do as my day job. And just a few caveats that I by no means have all the answers or many of the answers. And a wise person once told me that as a business leader, embarrassment is always around the corner. So as soon as you feel you have the answers, something comes up to humble you. But I believe that Linda invited me to share our thoughts today because we have, as UAC, done very well over the last few years in which most of the headlines have been negative. And so what I'll try to do is just share our story, what's worked for us. And if there are two things that I would like those who are in the room to take away, it's first, it begins with mindset. And the second, it's all about talent. And if there are any two things that you take away from the discussion, it begins with mindset, and it's all about talent. So at my very first meeting as UAC's CEO, we had a slide on the board, and that slide showed the logos of companies that were around when UAC started. One more down, please. And how many of those had survived? And the answer is very few, if any. I don't know if we could. I don't think we could find a single one. And what it taught us was that our predecessors had dealt with far greater challenges than anything we would ever encounter. And it gave us a sense of responsibility, but also a sense of confidence. UAC was established in 1879. So just to think through what our predecessors have been through, there was no Nigeria at the time. The country was created in 1914. We've been through 2 world wars, independence, a civil war, a pandemic, global financial crisis. So as a business leader, there's always going to be something. Now it's tariff tantrum. And so our job is to not suspend reality, but from a very clear-minded view of, do we believe with all this chaos there's opportunity or not? And that's why I think it begins with mindset. If we don't believe there's opportunity, we take certain actions, which I'll come to in a second. If we believe there's opportunity, we have to act with conviction. Because as business leaders, we influence the emotional energies of our company. So we reminded ourselves that people have been through far more than we've been through, and it gave us the courage to try to move forward. So when I say it begins with mindset, you can please click to page 5. If you open the papers in Nigeria, and I would argue in most countries in the world, it's generally an endless stream of bad news. Forex crisis, infrastructure challenges, security challenges, big losses. But then, if you go to the next slide, please, you hear people like Linda talk about Nigeria's massive demographic dividend. We are already one of the most populous countries in the world, and that number is going to keep increasing. Next day, if you go to the next slide, you see that the currency has collapsed. If you go to the next slide, inflation is at once-in-a-generation levels. But then, to bring back to the policies on slide 9, you then read about all the things that the government is doing. Subsidy has been removed, FX liberalized, minimum wage addressed, monetary policy, orthodoxy, and so on and so forth. And so for us as a company whose fortunes are going to be determined by the Nigerian consumer, we have to form one of two views. And if you go to slide 10, it shows the history of Nigeria's consumer spending power over the last roughly 30 years. And you see there was a period of rapid acceleration and then a period of very steep decline. And one mindset is what you see at the top of that slide, which is that Nigeria's consumer spending power collapses. The exact same picture on the next slide is that Nigerian consumer spending power may return to the trajectory that we saw in the 2000s. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Depending on your mindset and the conclusions that you draw from data, it influences everything else. Because you cannot embrace opportunities you don't believe in. We at UAC are reasonably optimistic that the picture is going to be that we are set to return to what we saw at the return to democracy. And this conviction is what allows us to go on to try to embrace opportunities. Next, also in the spirit of not suspending reality, I think there has to be a very clear assessment of what your organization's strengths are, because everyone can't do everything. So at UAC, we're crystal clear what our strengths are. We happen to own businesses that have some of Nigeria's strongest brands. Swan Water you see on the table. If you go outside, you see a Gala sausage roll, Supreme ice cream, Dulux paint, Santex, Caplux, Vital. So we're clear that that's a strength. Next is we have domestic manufacturing capabilities across Nigeria. We have factories all across the country. And what this does for us, as you will see on the next slide, is allow us to serve every single corner of the country. And the reason why this is important is if you scale the first hurdle of mindset and believe there's opportunity, if you don't know what your strengths are, it's very difficult to understand how you're going to attempt to exploit this opportunity. And so we spend a lot of time understanding what are the things we're very, very good at. You haven't seen me talk of us trying to do well in fintech. It's not one of our strengths. But we understand those strengths and we go off and try to exploit opportunity aligned to those strengths. With mindset clear and a clear understanding of strengths comes a crystal clear definition of what the company is trying to achieve and what it has to be very good at to achieve what it wants to achieve. I explained that at UAC we're a holding company, so we have the holdco and then we have individual operating companies. And we've defined very clearly what we're trying to achieve as a holding company or as a group, and therefore what we have to be good at. And I think it is crucial to almost understand what you are not going to do. So we as a holding company focus on only 5 things. And there are very many other things we can focus on, but we've chosen here the 5 things that we want to focus on, and here are the things we need to get very good at. And it's no coincidence that talent is number 1 on that slide, and it's what I spend more than 50% of my time on. We try to design our organization, find the best possible people, incentivize them, develop them. And I've found that as a leader, if that happens well, in my view, maybe 90% of the work is done. We also spend a lot of time on capital allocation. And just in layperson's term, what do we not have conviction in, either because our view is that we don't see opportunity or we're not good at it? And then we try to sell and exit. And examples are we used to control a real estate business. We saw great opportunity, but we did not feel we were the best people to manage that business. And so we sold it to a group called Custodian Investments. They've been fantastic partners, and it's no shame to say they've run it far better than we could. So we make sure that we allocate our resources to align with our strengths. It's another thing that we spend time being good at as a group. We have a technology hub. Some of my colleagues from the hub are in the room today. And their job is to build tools to help us work more effectively, quite simply. We're a manufacturing company, but we want to be the most tech-advanced manufacturing company on the continent. And it's in every single thing that we do. If you show up at most factories, you see people with notebooks scribbling who is coming in and who is coming out. If you show up at one of our factories, you meet someone that has a device like mine, and every single thing that you're doing has been baked onto technology, integrated with our ERP system. So we have an entire team. They have their own space and they have their own culture that builds technology to help us drive faster. One of the most underrated aspects of business is risk management. Again, our Group General Counsel is here in the room, and I see our regulator here. Many companies focus so much on trying to grow and sell and make money, they forget that you need a license to operate. And so we spend a lot of time ensuring that we have sound risk management, compliance, and controls so that we do not give up our license to operate. If you give that up, everything else you're trying to achieve becomes impossible. And finally, we have been around for almost 150 years, and so sustainability is important. You don't operate in markets for as long as we have if you're not welcomed by your host communities. So we need to be sure that we're good stewards of the environment and we're good tenants in our host communities where we've been for very, very many years. We try very hard to do these things at a group level. And for each individual company, we've also defined very narrowly how we think value is created or destroyed in a business focused on manufacturing, marketing, and sales of branded consumer goods. By far, the most important is consistent product quality and availability. We find very many people trying to grow their business, but you go out into the market and you don't find the product, or you buy the product and it's defective. So again, I would argue that the same way I said from a sort of group strategy perspective, in my opinion, 90% of the job is done with talent. In a branded consumer goods business, again, in my view, 90% of the work is ensuring that every single product you sell is of a consistent quality and the consumer can find it where they want it. This is incredibly difficult to achieve. It's mind-bendingly difficult to achieve because things like Gala sausage roll, we sell close to 2 million units every single day across Nigeria. So to make sure every single one of those pieces is of the same quality and available is very, very difficult to achieve. And then everything else we do in terms of operating company operations is aligned towards achieving that objective. Now, after we've defined what we're trying to achieve, and you can go to the next slide, you have to design your organization to achieve it. And we're trying to do essentially two things as a group. One is excellent capital allocation, risk management, and tech. And the second is commercial and operations. And so we design the organization to achieve it and attract talent with relevant experience to achieve those things. And I don't have that much time left, so I'll click through the rest very quickly. But after org design, this is the second, or maybe the most important message in addition to mindset. You have to surround yourself with a galaxy of stars. My job is extremely simple because I have very, very, very talented and aligned colleagues who make my life, frankly, that of a spokesperson because the company runs. So once the organization is designed, you must obsess about surrounding yourself with a galaxy of stars. And I have aligned bold and underlined because the incentives of this galaxy of stars must be aligned, otherwise people work at cross purposes. So we spend a lot of time designing incentives. Now, there are a few examples of each of these things which I would have skipped through, but I'll turn to slide 27. And what you see on slide 27 is that while the macro headlines over the last 5 years in Nigeria have seemed bad, we've achieved our strongest results ever in that time period. And it's because we had a mindset that there was opportunity. We were very clear what our strengths were and how we plan to win. And we spend an inordinate amount of time surrounding ourselves with a galaxy of stars. And in conclusion, on the last slide, is just the message that this is our story and our journey. We by no means have all the answers. We're quite clear that no two journeys are the same, except for one underlying theme. There's no end. So it's not like we sort of closed 2024 and felt we've arrived and we have all the answers. We constantly work on, assess, and tweak what we believe, and hopefully to deliver similar results for us over the next 5 years.